So welcome in the shop. We've got a two-part video series here. This first video we're going to be building a forend, and then the next one we're going to be doing the stock, all for my papa's old Ithaca 16 gauge. I'm using Osage orange for the wood for this, which is a bit ambitious because it's a super hard and dense wood, but it's also a very beautiful wood. You can see as it's freshly milled, it's actually almost a highlighter yellow color. But over time it oxidizes and turns to this beautiful kind of orange rust color. And you'll see right here that top part of that board is the oxidized color. It's been sitting around for a while, and then when I plane it to the fresh wood, you can see the transition into this really yellowish color wood. Osage was used commonly back in the days for bow and arrows, piers on foundations of houses. I mean, it is a wood that will not rot and is super hard. So I'm milling out obviously two parts here, the forend, which you see me cutting the length right now, and then the stock, which we'll save for the second part video. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark out the center on my blank. I'm going to put this on the lathe. So I'm using a marking knife, which I don't normally do that, but I want to be super precise. I want it right in the center of this blank. That way everything lines up perfectly. The first step in this is to carve, before I put it on the lathe, is to carve a relief in the top of it for the barrel. Now I want you to notice this really cool marking tool I have. I've been using this for 2 or 3 weeks now. Someone reached out to me and actually sent me this, and it's a great tool for so many different uses. I'm going to put a link in the description to that as well, so you can see. Go check that out, and if you wanted to purchase it, I would recommend it. I use it a lot. I find it to be a very useful tool for laying out. And what I'm using it for here is to lay out the spot where I want to cut out my relief. And I'm going to start with a fairly small gouge because I can take out material much faster with this. And then I've got a gouge that actually matches the curve of the barrel pretty closely. You can see it here, and I'm just going to work that scoop out and try to make it as clean as possible. You could use the router table and a box core bit to do this. But since I'm only making one of these and I can do it fairly quickly, I'm going to just use my gouge. It is a bit challenging because, like I said, Osage is super hard wood, but you can work it with hand tools. You're just going to be sharpening a lot. So I'll finish it off with my card scraper. I've got this cool card scraper with different curves in it, and it fits perfectly in that relief and just kind of smooths everything out, straightens it out, takes out the tool marks. A quick check on the barrel, and I want this, there's an attachment on the other side here, and I want that to be centered, the hole for that to be centered in the blank. And it's really close. So I actually did come back and do a little bit more work on that relief. So here I am on the lathe, just roughing it out round. I want to get it just basically into a cylinder. So once I get the cylinder shape and get it to the diameter I want, the two ends have a taper to them, and they have to be sized to fit a threaded nut that attaches them to the barrel. So I use the existing forend and just set up my calipers to the size I need, and then I use a parting tool. It's actually a 3/8 wide parting tool. I use it usually to cut tenons. And then once I have it sized where I want it, I can come back and put that little bevel on the end. That threaded nut, you have to bevel the end for that threaded nut to thread on. And that'll probably make more sense when we assemble it at the end of the video. So here's a comparison. You can see where I'm at with it. The next step here is we're going to checker this forend. And I've already put 2 coats of shellac on. You can see the shininess of it. And I'm using my dividers to kind of lay out my spacing. It's basically, there's no fancy design to this, no traditional design. You know, a lot of times you'll have pointed checkering on it, but I'm just doing basically a squared off checker on the base of the forend. It's just how I wanted to do it. I think it's going to look neat. At this point, I'm just trying to learn this technique. I'm not really trying to match any traditional designs. So with my border laid out, I'm going to lay out the actual checker, the diamond pattern. So it's going to be a 3-to-1 diamond. I'm just using a template here. So that basically means the proportions of the diamond will be 3 long to 1 tall. And I use my template to lay that out and then extend those lines just with this piece of thick paper. These are called master lines, and they'll be the starting point for our checkering. Okay, so obviously the first step is to cut the first groove, which is cut with a single V cutter. It's the master line, so I'll cut that, and then I come back with a double edge cutter. It has 2 files on it, so one will write in the first line I cut, and the other cutter will cut the new line, and you just keep moving down. It's a 24 line per inch cutter, so I'm cutting 24 lines within an inch. That's quite a lot, which makes it a little bit more difficult for starting off, but I like the look of it. And it takes a lot of time and a ton of patience. There was a few points in here where I wanted to give up. You can see some frustration right here.
Dude, you gotta focus on what you're doing. Jeez, I don't even know what line I'm on.
Just staying focused and cutting a straight line for that much time is difficult, and it's a real test on your concentration and your patience. But there's a huge reward for it because in the end it looks really cool. And I always say that the time you spend, when you feel like you're spending so much time, the 5 hours on doing something, but I'll use this forend and stock for the rest of my life, and hopefully my kids will. So that 5 hours is pretty insignificant when you think of it that way. So now I'm coming back. I've moved to my workbench to kind of get more comfortable. I was tired of standing, and I'm cutting the other master line in the opposite direction, and then I do the exact same thing. I go here with my double cutter and cutting 24 lines per inch, just run through the whole thing. And this is actually going to start making the diamond, so it's actually a little bit harder here because you're writing through high spots and low spots from your previous cuts, but once you get into a groove, it goes pretty well. You're not going to finish off at this point. You have to go through and do all of these, and then I come back with another cutter and deepen all my lines. So I have to go back through this 1, 2, 3, 4 times total, which is why it takes so long. And that deepening process is what points the diamonds and what creates a point at the top of your diamond so it's not flat. You can see I worked all the way into the night on this. It was a long, long run. And then the next day, finally, I came in with my border tool and cut a bead border around the whole thing. Just kind of clean it up, decorate it, makes it look real nice. And so there it is. It was about as good as I could get it. There are some mistakes in there. You're not going to see them because it's just hard to focus in on it. You get a good look at it here, and this is actually a really good section as I'm boring out this forend on the lathe. I think I've got an inch Forstner bit, and it's just long enough to cut halfway through so I can flip it and come from both directions and get this whole board out. Now, I did this previously in the last tool I did this on my drill press, the last forend, and it was a nightmare. So having the lathe is super helpful. It's the best way to bore these out. And there it is. There was a few little things to do to fit it, but this was basically the end of it. You'll see here when I slide it on that this little end cap threaded nut that goes on right here, and there's also one at the bottom. Those have to fit in there just right, and then I kind of tighten it down. This is probably not the best way to do this, but you can usually hand tighten them, but this was a little bit tight fit, so I just used a pair of pliers there to crank it down. And there was some tweaking to do to get the barrel to fit. The barrel drops in and threads on, and I had to do a little bit more carving on it, but it didn't take too much time. And that was basically it. It looked really good. I'm happy with how it came out. All right, so there it is. I'm really pleased with how this came out. First time ever checkering a forend. There's quite a few mistakes, but there's also a lot of good in there. So you live and learn, keep improving, keep practicing at this. It's really a matter of, like I said, patience and staying focused, because there's just so much time involved, and you have to stay focused on your lines. But taking breaks helps, and obviously probably using a little bit softer wood. Osage was a bit ambitious for the first time, but nonetheless, it came out good. I'm happy with it. You're going to have to stay tuned. This is going to be a two-part video series on the stock. We're going to be building that next, and just basically copying the same one that was there, same shape, and doing some checkering in on as well. Obviously the same wood. You can already tell it's about 10 days since that last shot. This is start to oxidize and turn a nice pretty color. So this is going to be a really, really, really cool piece of equipment when it's all said and done. Thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed, go subscribe so you can catch part 2 of this stock build.